around 2009-2010, when we signed the joint concept note with the Kingdom of Norway, one of the things involved in that was that we should explore the opportunity of entering into the EU FLEGT VPA. We had informal consultations with stakeholders throughout Guyana and with the EU. And then in 2012, and then in 2010, we wrote to all stakeholders asking them to indicate whether they want to be a part of this process or not. Because we recognize that once we signed on to it, then it will become a compulsory agreement. So it was something that the stakeholders had to give their consent to. The overwhelming majority of the stakeholders agreed that this was a good process for Guyana to embark on. And so in 2012, December 2012, Guyana signed a formal agreement with the EU. Since then, we've had, as I mentioned, numerous sessions. We're talking about since 2012 to 2017. So it certainly has not been a rushed process. It has been a process where we had massive consultations throughout the country, and consultations that were very meaningful, very participatory, and provided feedback to stakeholders, whether their concerns were being met, whether their concerns were being addressed, etc. What we've had also is that a lot of people have made criticisms that the National Technical Working Group was a handpicked group by the government. I want to let you know that this is certainly not so. Because after the signing of the agreement, stakeholders, about 90 stakeholders I think they were, from all different cross-sections of society, met at a workshop. And it was at that workshop that the National Technical Working Group bodies were selected. At that workshop also, a roadmap which would chart the activities of the VPA process was also developed. It was certainly not something that was driven by the government, but something that was stakeholder driven. Since 2012 to now, we've had many revisions of the roadmap. But I'm happy to report that we think in the course of this year, we hope by the second quarter, and before June, we will be able to initial the agreement. This agreement obviously has tremendous benefits to us. Guyana has always had access to markets, but in this case, it will open up access to more lucrative markets in the EU. And it will be a system where trade will be facilitated very, very easily.
This morning, I want to share on the National Toshaos Council role when it comes to the EU FLEGT VPA, the European Union Forest Law Enforcement, Governance and Trade Voluntary Partnership Agreement. The role of the NTC is to be there as a watch for the indigenous people's rights. You know that we all have rights. And here this morning you are hearing about land. And you know we love our land. And we know how to protect and to preserve our land. So the role of the NTC is to be there to see that our rights being respected, and also to raise our concerns. Because for generations we've been here as the first peoples of this land. Despite all the storms and ups and downs, we are still here. And we will remain here as the indigenous people. So the NTC role is to raise the concerns of the indigenous people with regards to the EU FLEGT. And the EU FLEGT really addresses illegal logging. And you know that the indigenous peoples, we live in the forest, and as our livelihood, we do logging, agriculture, and farming. And We name all the trees, we know them, and it is important for us also as indigenous people to secure our resources and to manage our resources. The EU FLEGT VPA, it gives the indigenous peoples an opportunity to know what you have as your resource and forest resources. That is where some villages already went ahead and did resource mapping. And I know that Region 9 is ahead with that. So our resource is very important to us, and we also must learn how to preserve it. And in doing that, we will preserve it for the future generation. The EU FLEGT VPA also provides a way for marketing. In some of the close by villages, they are ready for the EU FLEGT VPA because they are involved in logging, and here is an opportunity for them to do business. But the business of this EU FLEGT VPA must be done legally, and it must be done straight business. Because for you to export to the EU, it must be legal forest product or logs. But that also leads to village development. In some villages, you would find they're heavily dependent on logging, like Akwini in Region 2, Wakapau. Some of the coastal village, they depend on logging. And there's great potential for them to tap into this EU market. But there's a list of procedures that you ought to follow if you want to supply here. So here is the NTC there to share information with these communities on the EU FLEGT VPA. Just recently, the NTC, we visited 4 villages in Region 2. That's Bethany, Mashabo, Kabakaburi, and St. Monica, doing the awareness session on the EU FLEGT VPA. So the indigenous peoples, as Mr. Commissioner mentioned, supported the EU FLEGT VPA from the initial stage. That was way back 2009. It's a long process, and it's an ongoing process, and the National Toshaos Council fully support this initiative. Why we support it? Because we are concerned about the indigenous people's life and betterment. And I would like to say before I close is that for us to have development taking place in our villages, we must all work together. Many times I visit villages and they are separated. And separation causes destruction, hinder development. And I would like to say to my indigenous brothers and sisters who are listening to my voice in Region 9, North Rupununi, that this is the time for us to unite, put our hands together, and set a perfect example for the young leaders.
One of the things that I say when I have the discussions on the EU FLEGT is that while we talk about export to the EU, understand also that the system that is going to be put in place for the EU FLEGT will also be the system that governs timber that is being exported to any part of the world. So it is not a separate system that if you want to export to China, for example, it will not be a different system. And so it is important for us to understand that, because sometimes I think we go away thinking that this EU FLEGT thing demands more than if you were going to another market. The way the system is designed is just one system. And as Commissioner mentioned, some of the activities we have been, sort of as we're coming down to the end, or coming down to the close, and one of them is as you're maybe aware, there's some outreach that's happening at the national level, because whilst there's a team in the Rupununi, there's actually a meeting at Lethem today. There are teams that are scattered around the country and are also having this EU FLEGT discussions, really to understand if there are still any issues that we need to address. I think it's also important to mention that, or to note that whilst there is, while we all bring our concerns to the table, it is not possible to always have all those concerns and issues be part of an agreement or be addressed in a way that everybody is happy. As somebody mentioned, it's sort of a compromise, a give and take. You win a little, lose a little, but at the end of the day, we're all happy. So we're still looking for an agreement that, as far as possible, brings us to consensus, where everybody's views and concerns can be addressed in some way, shape, or form. One of the other things I think that is useful about the EU FLEGT, and you may have noticed as well, is that we're now having as part of our teams the NIS GRA, because what FLEGT will do also is that it has brought together a number of other agencies that are working, because when we talk about legality, it goes a little beyond just cutting timber from a legal source, whether that source is your private lands or state lands. And agencies like the NIS and GRA and so forth are also integrally involved, and that involvement is going to continue, because we recognize that, and what we're also saying to the EU is that these agencies, they play a very important role, and that role will continue and be improved. And so, also from where we sit, what FLEGT will do is not just necessarily to access the EU market, but it'll improve the systems that we have in country. So even though we've been tracking timber, we say we've been tracking timber for many years, we're also looking to improve that system. And you will agree that some of the concerns that relates to things like NIS, for example, and getting those things a little more streamlined benefits all. And so for us, it is what FLEGT does in a very good way is that it brings all the agencies together at the same table as we endeavor to agree on this voluntary partnership agreement. Two last points I want to mention is one of the very important things that will happen before we initiate this agreement, as Commissioner mentioned, is what we call the field testing. And what that means is that whatever we have agreed on paper in that sense, up until this point, that is still in draft, it will be tested. And that is whatever verifiers and indicators that have been written there, we will see are they true, and if they're not true, where the gaps lie. And I think it's important for us, because we may very well come to you again to talk about timber and how we're tracking it, we're tracing it, the records, GPS readings, to ensure these things are all in place. And if they're not in place, what is required to get them in place? So that field testing we expect to happen within the next maybe 6 to 8 weeks. So you may very well see a team, including part of the European Forest Institute, that is going to do the technical aspect of this work as part of that team. And I think very importantly, as we've been discussing as well, is there's an annex in the VPA that we keep encouraging all stakeholders that we talk to that talks about support measures. So while the VPA it is not just Guyana saying we can do all these things, but in some cases we may require support to make some of these things that we have on paper, workable and can actually be implemented. And so for that, we encourage stakeholders to tell us, and so we've got a lot of feedback over time as to what are some of the support that they require if the VPA is really going to work. Because one of the things about these agreements is that once you agree on it and it starts working, you're not looking to lower the standard or have it sort of fall apart once you start working at it. So once we finish the initialing, as Commissioner mentioned, we'll get into the implementation, and that, however long we take, that will be dependent on how fast we get those things in place. Just to note that even though we talk about signing or initialing, let's say in a few months, it is not going to start working until we have fully tested the system and say yes to the EU that we're ready, and all timber can be traced and tracked according to the system that we have laid out in this voluntary partnership agreement.
Now, after listening to the whole situation here, EU FLEGT VP, I just want to be more, especially to the more information on the field testing project what we are talking about. We want to be more informed. We want to have more information of what type of field testing we're talking about.
I use timber coming from your private lands when we talk about the field testing. And so if timber is for timber coming from private lands that is to be used commercially, there'll be a number of things that have to be complied with before that timber can be commercially utilized. So, for example, you will have to tag. I hope well, again, it might take too long to get into all of it. But you'll be tagging, and then you'll be filling out permits to ensure you're transporting that according. Then first, even before that, to say that you have the rights to the land, there must be some sort of title that is in place that gives you the legal rights to be able to harvest from that portion of land. So when we talk about field testing, it is to ensure that all those checks are in place. So it is not a case that somebody will come and say, listen, this volume of timber has come from Anai, by way of an example. And so we'll look at that timber, and then we'll work the system backwards to see can it be traced all the way back to the source, which is Anai. Let's say it made its way to Georgetown. And so when we're going back, we're checking that it came from Anai's land, it was tagged properly, a permit was filled out if it had to be signed by the Toshaos, that signature is in place. If there was a third party that was harvesting, so you didn't harvest yourself, you brought in a third party, somebody else who has the machinery or whatever to harvest, that there was some sort of an agreement that gave that person the right to be there. This is what we mean by field testing, so that we know that it is happening and it is happening consistently. So we'll randomly pick a volume of timber and say, can we trace it back to its source? Now, in that as well, as I mentioned earlier, because other agencies are involved, like NIS, for example, legality goes a little bit beyond just saying it came from a legal source. And there are NIS requirements, for example, for everybody who has persons working with them and even the employer as well. So the system we will check to ensure, is that in place? Are the NIS payments being made as they should? And if they're not, and I want a person to understand that, if in the field testing it is found that some of these things are not happening, it is not necessarily to penalize anybody, but rather for us to understand what we need to work on to make the system work as it is being designed. So the field testing is really to see that what we say we're doing when we talk about timber being tracked and traced in country all the way to the market is in fact happening.
When you hear work the system backward, it's not that the system is backward. I don't think it's a backward thing. It is just returning to where it began to ensure that you're following the system. Because this is bigger than just cutting a wood and selling it. It's to see how you are really using the forest properly, because none of us planted those trees. So you don't have the right to go cutting it down and wasting it, because the forest itself has a role to play in our daily life. So out in the, here is where it, Ewakrama, you heard from Ewakrama, certification. This will help to give you the opportunity to be certified, so you will sell your stuff sort of freely on the market. You will be recognized for that. So in the business, you have to understand the business. Don't get into something that you don't know and you're just breaking the law. Some of us, we know fully well that we are doing wrong and we prefer to go down that line, trying to smart the system. And we could get into trouble with that. That is why we double check to ensure these things are put in place. And that's why you have the GPS system in place to help with that process, tracking. First of all, I'd like to thank the Guyana Forestry Commission for continuing this process. It's taken years, but I see that we're getting there slowly, and I would like to suggest that the councils, every village council, have a team of probably 3 persons who would be able to make this a study so that they could help the planning of the village council, and this will also allow you to participate and make better representation to forums like these. So here is where you would also get connection to the Guyana Forestry Commission, get connection to the representatives, Mr. Rodney Davis, and you would be able to know the common and scientific names of these trees and their values. But this is in the environment that you have to protect, and you must know what you protect. So just would like to throw that out as a challenge to the Toshaos. So NRG, yes.